The aforementioned outer space treaties provide the mechanism for state parties to consult one another and to cooperate in solving problems which may arise in relation to the objective of, or in the application of, the provision of the agreements, and that such consultations and cooperation may also be undertaken through appropriate international procedures within the framework of the United Nations in accordance with the Charter. It is therefore noteworthy that the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 65/68 on transparency and confidence building measures in outer space activities requests the establishment of a group of governmental experts to conduct a study commencing this year, 2012, on outer space transparency and confidence building measures. Whilst stressing the priority of negotiating legally binding instruments on strengthening the international legal regime on outer space, there is no doubt that global and inclusive, transparent and confidence-building measures arrived at through broad international consultations could also be important complementary measures. The past decades have witnessed a significant increase in the conduct of human activities in outer space. Several national space agencies have either embarked upon or expressed interest in exploring the solar system, including missions to the moon and other celestial bodies. This said, the direct result of humankind's exploration and use of outer space since the dawn of the space age has generated massive amounts of space debris, particularly in those orbits that are most used. Therefore, and based on the understanding that approval of voluntary guidelines would increase mutual understanding on acceptable activities in space and thus enhance stability in space-related matters and decrease the likelihood of friction and conflict, the General Assembly in its Resolution 62/217 endorsed the Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines of the Committee and agreed that the voluntary guidelines for the mitigation of space debris reflect the existing practices as developed by a number of national and international organizations, and thus invited states to implement those guidelines through relevant national mechanisms. Although the guidelines constitute an important step towards the mitigation of space debris, they remain advisory technical standards to be implemented by states and international organizations on a voluntary basis through their own practices and procedures. The guidelines are therefore not legally binding under international law. They do not establish any legal duty to comply with them, and their violation would not generate any legal responsibility or liability in the event of damage caused by such misconduct. There is merit in the argument that binding guidelines for mitigation of space debris would facilitate the process of establishing fault under the Liability Convention, but what is certain is that multilateral programs of peaceful exploration of the solar system, including the moon and other celestial bodies, would constitute a symbolic and practical means of enabling a framework for peaceful space cooperation in concert with dual-use discussions of space transparency and confidence-building measures. Consequently, from its 52nd session, the Legal Subcommittee will, amongst other items, consider as a single item for discussion a general exchange of information and views on legal mechanisms relating to space debris mitigation measures, taking into account the work of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. The The legal subcommittee will also consider under a multi-year work plan an item titled Review of International Mechanisms for Cooperation in the Peaceful Exploration and Use of Outer Space. In my view, these steps are particularly critical in the context of outer space that has become a global common in which the safety, security, and predictability of all activities must be maintained in the interest of all. But I should be quick to add that the subcommittee will also continue to consider the item entitled Capacity Building in Space Law as a single item for discussion, which remains of paramount importance to national, regional, and international efforts. In fact, all the aforementioned activities further underscore the need for capacity building, training, and education in space law, which is fundamental towards increasing knowledge of the legal framework within which space activities are being conducted. I must state that the problem which has been prepared in respect of this 2012 Manfred Lachs Meatpot competition is compelling, as it is evident that the issues raised bear direct relevance to some of the critical issues pertaining to space law today, including on-orbit collisions, non-cooperative satellite removal, and damages. In this respect, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of capacity building for African countries, and I should therefore express my deep appreciation and gratitude to the Institute for International and Comparative Law in Africa, the Faculty of Law of the University of Pretoria, and the Aerospace Industry Support Initiative of the South African Department of Trade and Industry for their pioneering efforts in hosting this Africa Round. Thank you all very much for your attention.